Ray Harryhausen is without doubt one of the most influential people in cinema of all time. There's not a movie that gets made today that features special effects that doesn't owe something to the work of Ray Harryhausen, and I'm a massive fan of this guy. I was lucky enough to meet him like 15 years ago. He signed my book and it was honestly one of the most amazing days of my life. When I heard that there was an exhibition featuring a bunch of his work up in Edinburgh, you know that I had to try and get tickets for this thing. So I checked recently because I knew that it was kind of coming to the end of it, and I found out that it was ending in like 3 days. So without hesitation, I booked tickets, we arranged a lift, and we headed over to Edinburgh to check it out. Now, this was absolutely incredible. I just got back from it and I'm on such a hype still. I can't wait to show you what we filmed at the exhibition. This is just part one of a little two-parter that we filmed whilst up that end of the country, up in Scotland and then later on in Newcastle. So make sure you stick around at the end to find out what we filmed in part two, because that was also just as epic. These are two of the most amazing episodes that we've ever filmed here on Slimehouse. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is our coverage of the Edinburgh exhibition, Ray Harryhausen, Titan of Cinema. Boom! Slimehouse TV, myself Theo Kane, Malik on wheels, Judd on cam, and today we're on the road because we're heading up to Edinburgh in Scotland. We're going to the National Galleries to check out the Ray Harryhausen exhibition. Now if you watch this show, you know that I'm a massive fan of Ray Harryhausen, but who isn't a big fan of Ray Harryhausen? If you're into this culture, into movies, into toys and cool stuff and monsters, I guarantee you love a bit of Ray Harryhausen. So this is an exhibition that's been on for like 2 years, but because of the pandemic it kept getting closed and stuff like that. I never knew when I could go see it, but I checked the date and it ends in 2 days, so I had to be snappy. I got some tickets, we arranged a road trip, and today we're going up to check it out. I'm preparing to have my mind blown. I've watched these creatures on camera all my life, so to see them up close and personal is going to be crazy. I'm looking forward to it. Let's see how we get on. We got up about 6:30 AM because it's a real long drive to get to Edinburgh from where we live in Sheffield. So me, Malik and Judd, we all had a monster, we piled in the car and then we headed up the motorway. We also stopped off at the Metro Centre in Gateshead to check out the HMV there and sign some Unit 11 DVDs, and then just as we arrived in Edinburgh, we quickly stopped to pay our respects to the greatest game developer of all time and then went to the National Galleries to check out the exhibition. We did, however, go to the wrong National Gallery. We found out very quickly that there's 2 National Galleries in Edinburgh. I didn't know this. We just set the sat-nav to the National Galleries and headed towards where it told us to get. Then we spoke to a woman inside the museum and she said, yeah, there's actually 2 galleries. This is the wrong one. It does get quite confusing. The other one is half an hour away. So we only just made our slot. We almost arrived late, but thankfully we got there just in time. So we've arrived at the exhibition. We're a little tiny bit late because originally we went to the wrong museum, but we're here now. Hopefully they're going to let us in and they're going to let us use the tickets because they're very specific slots. So I'm preparing to have my mind blown. Let's get into it. So after making it there just in time and sorting out our tickets, we headed to room 1 of what we found out was 6 rooms. And this first room was completely dedicated to Ray Harryhausen's inspirations and then his legacy. So as soon as you walked in, there was a giant Willis O'Brien King Kong projected peering at you through a window. Now this is not a movie that Ray Harryhausen even worked on. He was only 13 when it came out, but he's never been shy at letting everybody know this was his ultimate inspiration, why he decided to pursue the art of stop motion. So it was really cool to see all this King Kong stuff because I'm also a massive fan of the original Willis O'Brien King Kong. There was some nice merchandise, lobby cards, that kind of thing. And then when you turned a corner, you was greeted by the first puppet of the exhibition, an original model of Mighty Joe Young. So this is not a puppet that was created by Ray Harryhausen, but he did work on that movie very heavily, handling like 90% of the animation on it. It was also his first introduction into working on a feature film, and not only that, it gave him the opportunity to work with his hero Willis O'Brien, which must have been the dream come true for the guy. So just seeing that thing up close, with its little latex deterioration and stuff, was worth the price of admission on its own. And then I looked to the left, and it's got a bunch of his original models that he made for his little independent features when he was first starting out. And if you've read his book, you've seen all these pictures before, so to see him up close and personal was amazing. They had the mammoth, the bear, the armatures for the dinosaurs he made for Evolution. And I knew that a lot of the models in this exhibition were either going to be like reproductions or like very good restorations and things like that. But seeing these in the original form with the damage and the bits of latex wear and stuff, I loved it. It was so cool. You then go through some double doors, and I walked straight past this, but Judd filmed it luckily, so I saw it after. They had an original Kraken from the Mattel Clash of the Titans toy series. Now this is like a holy grail item to anybody that's a toy collector. We all want one of these. And I could do a whole video just talking about how fantastic that is of a toy, but it's just so cool that they had that there. Again, this guy is the epicenter of everything that we love. Toys, games, movies, comics. It all comes back to Ray Harryhausen. This guy's right in the center of it. So to have that toy there, bridging the gap between my love of movies and toys, was incredible. Then we went into his legacy room, I like to call it. I'm not sure what the exhibition called it because I didn't read too many of the plaques, but they had stuff in there like his BAFTA award, his actual Oscar, clapperboards from Sinbad movies and Clash of the Titans, merchandise, books, novelizations, never before seen photographs. All seeing them there in person was incredible. And then in the middle of the room was his entire monster creature creating kit. The brushes and the paints that he used. The little eyes that he put inside the puppets to give them character and expression. I can't stress to you how lucky I felt just to be standing in this room. We'd only been in the building 5 minutes and we'd seen so much and not even scraped the tip of the iceberg yet. This room, as I would find out like all the other rooms as well pretty much, were plastered in original artwork. There's also a book that he released that I've also got signed because I'm a massive nerd like that, called The Art of Ray Harryhausen, which featured a bunch of his original pencil sketches, watercolours and oil paints and stuff like that. People don't actually realise how much of an all-rounder artist Ray Harryhausen was. Not only was he an amazing sculptor and animator, he was also a bad boy artist as well. So seeing all his artwork up close, and you see the pencil lines and the little rubbing marks and where he's messed up with the watercolour and then cut back, it was amazing. And this was just room 1 of 6! Now, room 2 was a little bit of a mashup. It had a random variation of Ray Harryhausen models in. First of all, they had King Midas. If you know about Ray Harryhausen, he didn't just work on movies, he was also a big fan of fantasy and folklore, and he created these Mother Goose stories, these animated kids films. But they had King Midas there, which was awesome. They also had a bunch of heads from those Mother Goose stories, the heads that he would interchange for different expressions when the people were talking. Then they had the tortoise from Tortoise and the Hare. So all those things were just awesome to see, even though they're not the stuff that's most recognisable when we think about Ray Harryhausen, and they weren't these scary monsters from his movies, showing what an all-rounder this guy was when it came to creating different styles. He could do everything from a real scary Medusa to a little cute kid's story. Then I saw something that honestly, and not for the first time of this exhibition, took my breath away. My heart skipped a beat when I saw this thing. And they had Bubo from Clash of the Titans, the actual mechanical owl from that movie. So there's 2 versions of that puppet. There's one that's stop motion and there's one that's mechanically controlled with a radio. And this one to me looked like the radio controlled version. And this is something that I've got such an affinity for. I've seen Clash of the Titans a bazillion times. And this owl, I always loved it. So to see it there in front of me was like a surreal, weird experience for me. It was almost like seeing an actor from a movie that hadn't aged. And you've seen him for years, like if you met Clint Eastwood and he'd not aged a day and he looked like he did in Good, the Bad and the Ugly, and he was dressed like Blondie, the man with no name, but he was there in front of you. That's honestly what this felt like to me. They also had one of his heads from an unfinished War of the Worlds project that he wanted to make and did a little pilot for, but then it never got took off the ground. But that's again something that I've seen many times in the little test footage that he did for it, so to see it up close and personal like that, and to be able to see it properly, not through a little grainy video that I've seen online. And then next to that they had what I don't think is the original Kraken, because I've seen the original Kraken many times and it's a lot more deteriorated than this, but they had at least a 1.1 scale replica of the actual Kraken. This is something that's probably like a 3D scan of the original or a real good restoration, I don't know. Then behind that, they had one of the most amazing things I've seen in my life. One of the actual skeletons from Jason and the Argonauts, with his little shield painted there, stood in front of me. You don't get to skeletons in stuff like Army of Darkness and Warhammer with that furrowed brow if it wasn't for Ray Harryhausen. He pioneered that style. Before that, skeletons look like an actual skeleton, which a skull isn't that scary, but he put that brow on it, that attitude. Nobody gave attitude to a creature like Ray Harryhausen, and his skeletons are phenomenal to me. They also had the 2-headed dog from Clash of the Titans, which still looks beautiful to this day. Then next to that, they had the entire breakdown of how he created the Pegasus from Clash of the Titans, from the armature to the mold that he'd pull. to the latex, to the final piece, and you could see all the patina and the little bit of wear and tear that would have happened to it whilst using it in that movie, but it just added so much more character to it. Then next to that, they had one of the giant scorpions from Clash of the Titans that rise from the ground when Medusa's blood drips into the sand and creates these giant scorpions. People talk about Harryhausen working with miniatures, but this thing was huge. It was 20 times the size of a real scorpion. I know, I used to have pet scorpions. I used to keep emperors and fat tails and Arizon and hairy scorpions and all this. This thing was ginormous and so much attitude in its face. Only Harryhausen could give that much character and that much attitude to a scorpion's face. It was phenomenal. So we left that room and headed to the next one, and I'm really having to compose myself. Like, I can't tell you enough, like, full guard down. This was really emotionally overwhelming, this whole experience for me. Just seeing what I'd seen so far was really hitting me hard, like on a crazy level. So I'm mentally preparing myself to check out the next room. So I gave my head a little bit of a wobble and prepared myself for the next room, and this was the first room where stuff was like categorized into the actual movies, all the characters from one movie in the same cabinet. And I walk into it, and the first thing that I see is one creature that's one of my favorite Ray Harryhausen creations from everything, and it's so random, and it's the giant crab from the Mysterious Island. Now, this is a movie that doesn't get talked about like some of his other more well-known ones, but it's one of my all-time favorites. As a kid, I used to watch this back to back, and in that movie, they find a giant crab and they fight it, and it was actually a real crab, and this thing was ginormous. They got a real crab shell and claws and legs, put an armature in it, filled it with latex and stuff, and animated it. And I know this was just a crab, but seeing this up close in real life was just so amazing to me. I've always loved crabs. I know that sounds really weird. I used to have pet crabs as well. Like, I love crabs and crustaceans, and this was always one of my favourite characters. Like, I can't stress that enough. Seeing this thing there was incredible. Next to it, they had the Nautilus from that movie. Now, I'm not sure if it's the original one, if it's one that's been restored. I've got pictures of it in his old books, and you can see that there's some damage on the latex, but I know a lot of these have been restored, so I'm saying it's the original one. Just another side note, I didn't look at any of the little plaques to find out if these were refurbished or if they were originals or if they were 3D scans and remakes of the original models. I know some of these are so old now that they do deteriorate, that latex, but also I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know which ones were originals, which ones were recasts, which ones were just remakes. I didn't want to know because I didn't want to take the magic away. As far as I'm concerned, they were all made by Harryhausen. They all had his magic interweaved throughout of them, and he had his hands on all of them, so I didn't want to look. I'm saying this one was a refurbished one of his original because it looks exactly the same as the one in his book. It's curled in the exact same way. There's no different as far as I'm concerned. It's also supposed to have a giant shell on its back because it's a Nautilus, like a big swirly shell. It didn't have that. Whether that got lost somewhere or he just doesn't have it anymore or they didn't have it displayed, I don't know why, but it was still awesome. They didn't have the large tall bird, ostrich bird thing that's from Mysterious Island that gets its throat cut, but they did have one of the bees, which looked great, looked like it had come straight out of the movie. It was awesome. Then next to them, they had a cabinet full of creatures from the Valley of Guangzhi, one of my favourite Ray Harryhausen movies. And I know that's like a real dumb thing to say because I love all of these movies, but this is another one that I have a lot of affection for. It's one that, again, doesn't get talked about a lot like his other movies. It's a western where these cowboys find a valley that's full of dinosaurs and they bring them back to their western town and all chaos ensues, and it's amazing. If you've not seen it, please do check that out. But in that movie, there's a giant stop-motion elephant, there's a little tiny cute horse that's actually next to Boopo, probably the only one that's actually 1.1 scale to humans in the movie because they find it and it's a miniature horse. It's really cute. They bring it out of the valley, and he had that there. In the cabinet next to that, they had the giant turtle from 1 million years BC. Again, a creature that I've seen 1,000 times. I love that movie. Then around from that, they had all the characters and creatures from 1 million years BC. They had the little stop-motion Raquel Welch. They had the pterodactyl. They had the Allosaurus, which is, in my opinion, the greatest sculpt of a dinosaur that's ever been. The way that it's got a curl in its lip, the snarl, the cheekiness to it, the grin. It's got so much character. Again, Harryhausen, flawless work. It is honestly my favourite dinosaur sculpt of all time, and I saw it there right in front of me. There was also some posters on the wall, a giant Valley of Guangzhi original poster, a giant 1 million years BC poster featuring the most beautiful woman that ever lived next to my mom, Raquel Welch, with this dope pink font, beautiful quad posters. Like, I would die to have them on my wall, and they're right there. Then a little bit further on, they had the aliens and the caterpillar from First Men in the Moon and the giant rocket ship. Again, this is a movie that doesn't get talked about like the others in Ray Harryhausen's filmography, but this is an awesome movie. It doesn't have that many creatures in it, but the ones that do, bang, and they had them there. They also had the flying saucers from Earth versus the Flying Saucers, all the different variants in sizes, the one with the little antenna that comes out of the top. You can see the little imperfections in them, and it just makes it all the more incredible. Around the walls again, there was so much original artwork, like so much, you couldn't take it all in. You would need like a lifetime to be able to go through and appreciate every single one of these things on their singular value. And then they also had a big projection showing people how the backplate projection worked and the front plate projection and how we would put the creatures into the scenes. This stuff is priceless. This is really, really priceless. You can't even gauge how lucky you were if you was able to visit this thing. So we walked out of that room, again, just trying to compose myself, just trying to gather my thoughts and my bearings. And we headed to the next room, which we didn't spend too long in because that was a cinema screen playing a video that was made for the exhibition, and we didn't have time to sit and watch all that. I needed to spend that precious time looking at models. But I did see the homegirls Carolyn Monroe and Martine Beswick from HorrorCon, so it was wicked to see them there representing. So we watched a little bit of that and then headed to the next room. So as soon as you walked in, they had 4 of the models from Jason and the Argonauts. They had 3 of the skeletons. They had the harpies that attacked the blind man. They had Talos and they had the Hydra. Now, I'm not sure which one of these are original models or which ones are restorations, whether they 3D scanned them and made them again and stuff like that. And the only reason I think that they wasn't the original models is, number one, I've seen the original models many, many times on pictures and they're really deteriorated. So it would be more trouble than it's worth trying to restore them. It would be much better to 3D scan them and create them again. Also, each one of the cabinets lit up and behind them was an actual video of that character being stop motion animated. So I think that these were really good 1.1 3D scan recreations. But again, I didn't look at anything that was raw because I didn't want to know. As far as I'm concerned, they were the real things right there. They had the Harryhausen magic flowing through them. That's all I needed to know. They were what Harryhausen made and I was looking at them. Then you turn round and they've got a full display case full of the models from Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. They've got the fucking Troglodyte. Now I know from reading his book that this is not the original actual Troglodyte from the movie, but during the creation of Clash of the Titans, he did a recast of the Troglodyte in solid rubber, so it's that one. I've compared it to the one in the book. It's exactly the same. This is the one that Harryhausen cast in solid rubber from the original mould. They've got the saber-toothed tiger with the little blood mark where it gets shanked with a spear. They got the Minotaur. They're made in gold looking fucking henge. They've got the baboon that the prince has turned into. The whole reason they go on the mission is to try and get him turned back. And they've got the walrus from the snow scene where they fight the walrus. It's all there. And part of you is thinking like, you're robbing them by paying just £12 to see this thing. But then at the same time, you're like, they're robbing me by showing me it and not letting me have a lifetime to be able to study every fucking inch of each model. This whole thing had me excited, but it had me like worried that I were going to have to say goodbye to this stuff. And I couldn't spend longer looking at it. Next to that, they had all the creatures and models from the 7th voyage of Sinbad. The 6-armed statue looking awesome in bronze. This and Talos, although they have really simple paint jobs, they just nailed the look of making them look like they were cast out of bronze and cast iron and whatever they were made from, whatever fantasy metal they were created from that could bend and move and attack people with a sword. They got the centaur, looking menacing. You don't get to stuff like Motaro from Mortal Kombat without that centaur from Ray Harryhausen. They've got the griffin there and it looks as fantastic as ever, and you can see that the little wings on its back are chicken wings. Right by that, they've then got a cabinet that's dedicated to Ray Harryhausen's first Arabian fantasy movie, The 7th Voyage of Sinbad. So there's the armature there from the Cyclops, which is now just an armature that originally started off as the Ymir armature from 60 million miles to Earth, but then he had to cannibalize that to create the Cyclops. He then had to cannibalize it again to create Calibos, which I'll get to in a minute, from Clash of the Titans, because he took its leg off for Calibos's hoof leg. So this one has been restored with a leg that's the same as the left-hand side, so now the right leg, or the other way around, is now the same, so that it stands proud. But again, just seeing that, knowing that that's the armature that we've seen animate that Cyclops a bazillion times, it was incredible. They also had the head of the dragon from Sinbad's Seventh Voyage. They didn't have the body, but I know that the body was also a cannibalized body of the beast from 20,000 Fathoms. So back then, due to budget restraints or time restraints and stuff like that, sometimes he had to just rip apart an old creature to create a new one. And as much as he loved these creatures, and he said in his books he hated to do it, these were also times when you didn't really know that this thing was going to be so well loved all these years later, and he just had to get a job done. Also, it was his dad that made him all these armatures, so imagine that. His dad made all these armatures. So even though armatures existed before in movies like King Kong, in many ways, him and his dad pioneered the armature. Before you could just buy a kit or buy parts to make your own armature, his dad was engineering these from scratch. Like, that in itself is just so incredible to me, and just adds even more leverage and weight to his legacy. They had the giant crossbow there that they fire at the dragon, which was more of a prop than a stop-motion animation puppet, showing again how much of an all-rounder this guy was at creating cool stuff. And then adjacent to that was a giant bust of the Kraken from Clash of the Titans. Now, again, I didn't read the plaque to find out if this was a restoration or not. I don't even want to know, so don't even let me know in the comments. Don't kill the illusion for me. This was a giant bust, and it looked really fresh. It did look like if this was a restoration, it was an incredibly good one. And also, seeing this up close makes you realise how, like, not worthy that Mattel Kraken is. That Mattel Kraken that's a holy grail for so many toy collectors like me. Like, you see this big thing there in front of you, and you're like, yeah, that's the one. That's the true holy grail. That's the real Kraken. Across from that, there was 4 tiny little windows with original Clash of the Titans models in there. So they've got the Vulture. They also had Calibos from Clash of the Titans. You can see the leg that they took off from the Cyclops to make him his hoof leg. Then in the case next to that, they had the original Medusa from Clash of the Titans. Now, there's lots of speculation about whether there was different models of this Medusa made. Ray Harryhausen himself in his book says that there was just one. But if you look at the one that's in his book, it has nipples. And then the one that's in the movie and the one that we see here on display doesn't have nipples. So at first I thought maybe it's a restoration, but if you look back at old TV footage from the early 90s and the 80s and stuff like that, when he took the Medusa onto TV, it didn't have any nipples. So maybe Ray Harryhausen took the nipples off the model and it is the original one, or this was a restoration and a 3D scan from one that he resculpted or recast from that original mold. I don't know. Maybe I'll never know. Do we really need to know? Either way, it's awesome. And it sounds like I'm obsessing over nipples on a Clash of the Titans Medusa, but I'm really not. I'm not obsessed with nipples. I'm obsessed with Ray Harryhausen. They also had another Pegasus from Clash of the Titans. As if one wasn't cool enough to see in the other room, we now get to see a second one. And again, you can see the wear and the tear and the bits of deterioration on it. But we want to see that it's part of that character's legacy. It's part of its story. It's part of what that model is. And then, just for good measure, they've got another Bupo. So this will have been the stop-motion animation version. So the other one, the mechanical version, the actors would sit on their arm and they would work with, that was remote-controlled. And then this one was the stop-motion version. This room, like all the others in the museum, was just a complete assault on the senses. Everything that you could love about Ray Harryhausen was all there around you. All original. I just felt like I was soaking up the energy. Then when you leave that room, they had a bunch of original posters again. Jason and the Argonauts, Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, Clash of the Titans. Amazing. Just seeing these posters up close like that, again, I've said it multiple times, was worth the price of admission. Now, the last room was a little bit more catered towards kids and stuff like that. It was interesting to see, but it wasn't full of models or anything. They had a turn wheel animation system with a button that you press on the floor, and it would spin round and show you how animation was originally created. There was also a green screen where you could mat yourself in and film yourself fighting with a Hydra. So this is where it ended, and I'm not even gonna lie. You were supposed to walk out here. You were supposed to leave the building. But me and Judd snuck back round and went through the whole thing again. And I'm not even ashamed to admit that, because I needed to see this thing again. I'd gone through and filmed most of it on my camera, and as much as I saw it with my own eyes, I still didn't feel like I'd had my Ray Harryhausen fixed of the day. I might never see this thing again. I might never see these models again. I probably won't. They might do the exhibition again, I'm sure they will, and I will be 100% going to it, but I just thought, if this is the last chance that I ever get to see these models, I want to make the most of it. So we went through the whole thing again. I switched the lenses on my camera, got a couple more shots, and really tried to take in what I was looking at. Wow, so I'm completely mind blown. Malik just rang me to pick us up, and I couldn't even get my words out to tell him the address of where we were, because it was unbelievable. Seeing that stuff up close, like, this was a long trip for us to come to Edinburgh to do it, but it makes me feel that like I would have travelled 1,000 miles to get to this place, 10,000 million miles, whatever it took. Like, it's a once in a lifetime experience, and I cannot stress how unbelievable it was if you're a fan of Ray Harryhausen. So I just want to thank this gallery for putting it on, because I thought they were going to have like 5 to 10 models. I didn't actually research before what they were going to have here, because I didn't want to ruin it. I just wanted to come in and be completely unbeknownst to what I was going to see, and it was more than I could ever expect. There was so many models. I couldn't believe the amount of models that they had. To me, Ray Harryhausen is up there with one of my greatest inspirations ever. He's like literally one of my heroes. If you talk about the Mount Rushmore of people who are the most influential people in movies ever, Ray Harryhausen is 100% up there for me. He's the first guy that I remember watching documentaries of and watching clips online and on videos and stuff like that on making-ofs, and getting emotional just listening to him talk and listening to how he approached the craft and how he created. Like I said, when I was about 19, I was lucky enough to meet him, and he signed my book, and I shook his hand and I just said thank you. That's all I said, and it was honestly one of the most amazing days of my life. So being able to go and visit this was such an honor. Like, I feel so incredibly honored and privileged to have even been able to see one of these models. So to go to a museum full of it, it's something that I will honestly take to my grave as one of the most amazing experiences of my life. So if this thing does come back around and you do get the chance to go and see it, then I urge you, if you're a fan of Ray Harryhausen, go to it, because you won't come out of the museum the same person as you were when you walked into it. You will feel different. I still feel elevated, and it was a couple of days ago that we came back. Now, like I said, we did film 2 things while we was up in Edinburgh, and this was just the first one. The second one I'm going to get into in the next episode, but I'll show a couple of clips now to kind of give you a gauge of what we came across. In the meantime, this has been Slimehouse TV. If you haven't watched this show before, then please give us a like. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and binge the back catalogue, because there's a ton of cool stuff on this channel. I like to cover all stuff like this. If you did go to the exhibition, let me know down below in the comments what your experience was of it. And if you didn't go, then let me know down in the comments below what your favourite Ray Harryhausen creature was, or your favourite Harryhausen movie, because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that watch this channel that owe a lot of their love to cinema and comics and games and toys to Ray Harryhausen. I'm also on Instagram, so if you want to follow me on there, I'm going to be putting up a lot of exclusive pictures from this exhibition. That's at Theo_Kane_Slimehouse. And if you want to help support this channel even more, help us hit the road and go check out cool stuff like this and cover it for the channel, you can head over to patreon.com/SlimehouseTV, and for as little as $1 a month or more, if you're feeling extra generous, you can help support this channel, become a slime renegade, and help us make these videos bigger and better than ever. In the meantime, I'm Theo Kane, this is Slimehouse TV, and I'm going to catch you in the next video. Until then, I'm gone. Pow!